Well, if social media had not put its thumb on the scale in the middle of this election, Donald Trump would likely be a runaway favorite to win the election. As it is still not over. He very well could end up as president, but social media has played a heavy role in restricting what people can see and what people can hear, and they're continuing to do so, even as President Trump tweets about the situation at the ballot boxes across the country, even as he tweets about the possibility of voter irregularities. He is being censored. It's not just Trump, right? Our own Matt Walsh here at the Daily Wire, host of the Matt Walsh Show, he had the temerity to tweet something out that was then censored by Twitter. It happened to be correct. Matt, thanks so much for joining the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So why don't you lay out the story for us, what you tweeted and then what President Trump retweeted, and then how you ended up in the crosshairs of Twitter's censorship brigade.
Yeah, there was someone tweeted there had been reports about large amounts of ballots that sort of appeared, and all were going for Joe Biden and none for Donald Trump. It was like 100,000 plus ballots or something like that. 100% for Biden, none for Trump. This was tweeted. I retweeted it and added my comment that this is concerning. You know, we need to look into this and be concerned about this. And then Trump retweeted it as well. And next thing you know, they censor my tweet, which means it's still there, but it means you have to click, you take a couple steps to get to it. And they have all these kinds of warnings and red flags. Look out, it might be misinformation. Now, I'm not sure how an opinion can be misinformation. I have never quite understood this from Twitter. If I'm giving my opinion, am I misinforming people of my opinion? Because that's what it was. And then it turns out that, yeah, now it turns out this was not an example of fraud supposedly, but this was an example of a mistake that was made. Decimal point was put in the wrong place or something. That's what they're telling us. Well, the point is there something concerning did happen. There was something weird that happened. And on Twitter, on social media, we were talking about it. People were reporting it. And we should be able to do that, especially during an election when people want to know what's happening and everything's delayed. So, but Twitter is playing the role of kind of editor in chief and saying, these are not opinions that we want expressed on our platform, and I don't think they should be able to do that.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing how social media have really cracked down on all of this. The reports in the last few minutes. There's a group on Facebook called Stop the Steal, and the basic idea is that you are going to monitor election fraud. There are hundreds of thousands of members, people who are attempting to presumably weigh in to stop election fraud, and apparently this is bad, so Facebook simply shut it down. It is incredible to see how social media have really, as I say, put their thumb on the scale here. You've been ranting about this for a while. So this battle is going to outlast this election cycle, obviously. What do you think are the steps that ought to be taken here with regard to social media at this point?
Well, I think I'm always skeptical. I'm like one of those conservatives. I'm always skeptical about getting government involved and that sort of thing. But I think we're at a point where the easy answer, the usual conservative answer of, well, let the free market take care of it. I think we're beyond that. There is no free market solution to the social media monopoly, Facebook and Twitter. I mean, unless someone's got $100 billion laying around where they want to start their own Facebook or their own Twitter. But aside from that, it's not going to happen. And they do exercise a lot of power to manipulate and to sway our elections. This used to be something that liberals pretended to be concerned about, and they seem to be less concerned about it now all of a sudden because it's going in their favor. So I think there is a role for the government to step in. I also think, at the very least, these companies should be honest about what they are, the service they provide. If they have an ideological bent that they're trying to promote, if they have a certain ideology, a certain opinion that they want to promote on their platform, they should have to be honest about that and tell people about it. At a minimum, I think that should be the case, but probably we can go further than that.
We're speaking with Matt Walsh, host of the Matt Walsh Show over at Daily Wire. Okay, so Matt, what are your overall impressions of how the election went? I have to say, I'm feeling pretty good about the election, pretty optimistic about the election. Even putting aside the presidential, which again, we are still waiting to see what exactly happens here. The president's got lawyers on the ground pretty much everywhere and observers everywhere. There are a bunch of lawsuits being filed. All of that is going to get hashed out, and hopefully the system ends up making proper decisions in all of that, and we'll keep putting our focus there. But overall, I think that if you're a conservative, you have to be pretty happy with the results, given the fact that Republicans apparently picked up 100 seats in state legislatures across the country, didn't lose a single state house across the country, picked up all the levers of power in New Hampshire in the state legislatures. The Republicans, it looks like they're probably going to hold the Senate. They picked up 7 to 13 seats in the House minimum. I mean, that's a good night for Republicans.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, taking the presidential election out of it completely, which we can't really do, but when it comes to the down ballot stuff, I think that there is it would be hard not to feel, even if you're as pessimistic as I am, it would be hard not to feel happy about that. And it kind of shows that the Democrats, they're not speaking to the real issues that people care about, the normal people care about. They have a very specific radical left coalition that they've been trying to appeal to, especially in the last few years. I mean, it's been this way for decades, but especially in the last few years. And I think they're starting to see the results of that. Now, whether they learn the right lessons, I think is very much up in the air. I mean, if you look at some of the chatter on social media and leftists and analysts and pundits, what they're saying, I mean, the lessons they're taking from what I've seen is that America's racist and minorities are going to Trump because they're self-hating minorities, or toxic masculinity among black men. I mean, these are the kinds of things you're hearing from the left. So they're of course learning all the wrong lessons, which I guess is good for Republicans because it means that they'll keep losing.
Yeah, I mean, that is the good news for Republicans. I think that Democratic coalition is getting more and more fractious, and I think that it is going to fracture. I think one of the reasons you saw such a big spike in the Latino vote for Republicans, particularly in Florida and Texas, is the Democrats decided that they were going to embrace socialism, which is what many Latinos and Hispanics were attempting to avoid by coming to the United States in the first place. They've decided they were going to embrace Black Lives Matter and proclaim that all minorities in the country were incapable of succeeding, which is just something that a huge number of minorities disagree with. There's also this misimpression in liberal white circles that what black people really want to hear is that riots and looting are good, which is such a bizarre idea. The people who suffer most in those situations are law-abiding black folks, which is most black Americans.
Yeah, and that's why I talk about with the Democrats. They've kind of conflated Black Lives Matter, the organization, with the demographic group that Black Lives Matter supposedly represents. But that's not the same thing. And if you look at what Black Lives Matter actually believes in, of course, they've scrubbed their website recently to make themselves a little bit more appealing to the general public. But up until that, if you looked at the kinds of things they talk about, they're trying to defeat heteronormative thinking and to dismantle the nuclear family, and they're very focused on things like trans rights. I mean, really, Black Lives Matter is, more than anything, it seems to mainly be focused on gay rights. It's really more of like a gay rights organization. At least if you look at the issues that they talk about on their own website, this is very little to do with just the average black family or the average white family of any race. But that's how the Democrats, they've decided that if you're a racial minority, if you're a black person, it means that you are a far left radical, and we're gonna speak to you on that level. And surprise, surprise, it doesn't really work.
That's Matt Walsh of the Matt Walsh Show. Tune in over at dailywire.com. Become a subscriber over there to get more of Matt. Matt, appreciate the time. Facts don't care about your feelings, and it's a fact that the Ben Shapiro Show is the largest conservative podcast in the nation. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all of our content.